Hi, this is Andrew Engel with Fresh Picked Leads. We are the lead generation company for Wisconsin real estate investors and business owners. And this is our second video of our new video series we're calling Fresh Picked Fridays. And what we're aiming to do with this video series is inviting a real estate investor or business owner to talk a bit about what they're doing to attract their next customer or close their next deal or get their next sale. And we're really trying to frame this conversation to lead generation, marketing, negotiation, sales, and closing. And today we have with us Amy Farrow from Brookfield, Wisconsin. And she is not only a real estate investor, but she is also a real estate and business attorney. So I'm very excited to have you on, Amy. Thanks for joining us. And if you wouldn't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Andrew. As you can see, I'm working at home today, so try not to look at everything that's going on around me. But yeah, you're right. I've been a real estate investor for about 20 years, and I'm also a real estate attorney and a real estate broker. So it kind of all works together. We have a company called Pad Home Buyers. That's our investment company. We have Cameron Real Estate Group, which is our brokerage firm. And then we have a myriad of other vendors and support services, including my law office and the rest of it. So I'm super excited to talk to you today, Andrew, because we've been using your services for a while, and it's really great. If people aren't using Fresh Pick Leads, they're crazy. So I appreciate
that. Yeah, the feeling's mutual.
Well,
but what we wanted to talk about today was foreclosures, but Amy actually mentioned to me just a little bit ago that she had a success with one of the leads that were evictions. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the records that was an eviction record, we mailed to them. We sent a very professional letter, and we sent it within a day. Probably a day at the most, probably 2 days once we got the lead. And we must have just hit that seller at the right time, because she no longer wanted her 6-family. And she's also got a couple more properties we're actually going to buy from her. But we picked up that 6-family, we wholesaled it out, and it actually closed yesterday for a wholesale fee of $22,578, and I think like 16 cents actually.
Excellent. Well, congratulations. That's
well,
awesome.
Thank you. You're the one that helped us with that. So I really appreciate that. That was a big win for us.
Glad to hear it.
You're very
So
welcome.
so going back to what we're going to be talking about today, which are foreclosure leads. So the reason I want to talk to you about this is because you are an expert in the foreclosure, especially given your attorney title. So if you could you tell us why a foreclosure lead is valuable to you?
Well, Andrew, 20 years ago when I started in the real estate investment business, it was because I knew foreclosures pretty well as a lawyer. And I actually started door knocking the foreclosure notices. That's the first properties I ever bought. Was I knocked on the door and said, "Hey, you're going into foreclosure. You want to sell it to me before it goes?" And people started saying yes.
Wow, I love that.
Oh, okay. That's great. And of course, it's evolved over the years into different strategies, different marketing, different things, because obviously the world has changed in 20 years. But some things, do never change, or everything old is new again, because we are actually door knocking foreclosures again as one of our marketing strategies.
Wow.
So everything old is new again, I guess. But, that kind of takes us around to marketing, and personally on the legal side of things, I learned on the other side of the fence, and I still do foreclosure work for investors, particularly private lenders in Wisconsin when it has to happen, unfortunately. But I know that process really well. I know all the ins and outs of it. So we use that to our benefit when we're marketing to foreclosures as well.
Okay, that makes sense. So what would you say is different about your marketing when you are marketing to foreclosure leads as opposed to any other lead type?
Well, foreclosures, like, a lot of other really motivated people who are in a bad situation, when you're marketing to them, you really have to understand that they don't want to talk to you. They don't want to talk to anyone. So the mail for foreclosures, or even pre-foreclosures, they're not opening their mail. because every time they open their mail, they get more bad news. So particularly with foreclosures, you really have to look and put yourself in the shoes of the person who's going through foreclosures. This is not a good thing for them. So if you just go in there very aggressively and say, we're going to take this over, and we're going to, you're going to be out anyway, and that strategy will not work. You need to figure out, well, they don't want to answer the phone. They don't want to open their mail. So how are we going to get their attention? And so a lot of times it is working, sometimes it's working through lawyers. Sometimes it's going over and leaving them something at their house, like something that you're hanging on the door of their house saying, hey, I stopped by to talk to you. We really want to talk to you about, what's going on with the house. Give us a call. You never want to mark anything on the mail. We can help you stop foreclosure, because it's embarrassing to the person. You need to think of more creative ways to market to people who don't want to answer their phone, who don't want to answer their mail. So text blasts are a good way to get a hold of them. Going and leaving something physically at the house, something that's helping them. It has to be something that is actually trying to help them, or they're going to throw it away. So sometimes you might leave a letter, that's folded a couple times, and it's in really bright paper, and you put it in a plastic bag that you can hang on the door. They make them you can get them on Amazon, where it's just a clear plastic bag, and you put a bright piece of paper in it, and it says, hey, we stopped by, we're looking to help some people, give us a call. And, you have to sort of tailor the message to the person much more than any other mail, much more than an eviction, much more than a probate or anything else, because these people don't want to pay attention at all. So something simple like that, a text blast, a door hanger, that's going to work better on a foreclosure than maybe sending a letter to them that they're not probably going to open.
Okay. Yeah, that's great insight. I mean, it sounds like empathy, sincerity, and discretion are kind of key points with
Definitely.
this lead type. Okay.
Definitely.
So you've given us a lot of information as to, I guess, what you're doing that's unique. So maybe this question's already been answered, but what would you say, is there anything about what you're doing specifically that is making you unique and you stand out among anyone else who may be putting up a door hanger or sending a text message?
Sure. I think right now, a lot of people don't understand how the foreclosure process works. They don't understand the timeline. So when you're talking about Wisconsin, it's a judicial foreclosure. They have to go to court. So I think there's a misnomer of what a pre-foreclosure is in Wisconsin. It's a very small amount of time that the foreclosure has not started. And so a lot of people say, well, I only want to work with people who are about to go into foreclosure. And my response to them is, by the time you find out about it, you've missed that, because there really isn't any super good way to go after pre-foreclosures. And so it's sort of a hit or miss. And so if you don't understand the logic of the process and how it works and what the lender is required to do to be able to foreclose, I think people get kind of confused about, well, I thought I was getting a pre-foreclosure lead, but the foreclosure's already been filed. How is this all working? And I think a lot of people give up on those leads once they've actually been filed in court, because they don't understand the process, and they don't understand like what's going through the lender's head, what's going through the borrower's head. And you have to kind of take a step back and say, what's the process? And I'm happy to give to you, I did a flow chart of the process, and I'm happy to, provide that to, people who want to take a look at it. But, step 1, step 2, step 3, I think that's really important if you're going to, take the time to try and buy foreclosure properties. You really need to understand the process, and you don't need to understand every single little thing that's happening, but you need to understand where they're at in the process, because a lot of the people who are going through foreclosure, they don't understand it either. They don't know where they're at in the process. And it comes off as sometimes a little disingenuous from the people that are going through foreclosure. And you have to sort of remind yourself, no, they really don't know what's going on. And they feel very clueless and very afraid. And so you have to be able to, understand that and help them by explaining where they're at.
Sure. And I think that's a great point that you bring up, because I think a lot of maybe newer investors or less experienced investors may feel kind of the same thing, like they don't know enough to actually start marketing to foreclosures because they don't know enough about the process. Um, but it's a great point that either does the person going through the foreclosure.
They don't.
So
Yeah.
anyone who is maybe looking to get started with marketing to foreclosure leads, what would you say are the biggest or most common challenges or roadblocks to this lead type?
I think when you're buying lists from other sources, you don't really know what you're getting when you're buying it, because a lot of these national providers, they're just not, they're not focused in on the differences between different states. And so what takes this process in Wisconsin could be totally different from even another judicial foreclosure state. But then we have states like Texas or California, or some of those other states that their processes are completely different. They could be a non-judicial state where the process is much smaller. You have a lot less time to deal with it. The typical foreclosure in Wisconsin can take a minimum of 12 to 18 months. That's expected, unless there's something very, very unusual going on. Because of the federal loan process, you have to try and do a loan modification. You have to try and mediate with these borrowers. And so that's the hard part, is when you buy these other lists, you don't know what you're getting. And then if you don't know what the process is, you don't know how much time you have to complete it. So I think learning where your lead is coming from is super important. And then knowing the process is the second thing. And it's process intensive. And so you really have to dig in there and at least understand the basics of the process and where it's at.
Okay. So I guess given the amount of time that this process typically takes, is there anything you're doing when you have a promising lead? Is there anything you're doing to improve the probability that you are going to close on that?
Sure. You have to touch these sellers all the time. I mean, and I don't mean physically touching. I mean, you have to have something set up where you're talking to them very, very regularly, because they're nervous about the process. They're nervous about what's happening, and they start getting these letters all the way through the process that's saying, we're going to kick you out, and that's how they're interpreting these letters. And they don't understand what's going on. So if you just get it under contract and then move on to the next one, you're going to lose this seller because they're going to freak out, and they're going to try and sell it to somebody else. So you really have to stay in constant communication with them about what's happening, what's going on. Here's where we're at. Here's when it's going to close. Here's what I need you to do. And unfortunately, a lot of people won't do that. And particularly with foreclosures, more than probably any other type of lead, you really have to hold that seller's hand. You really have to communicate with them well, and really be available to talk, because they're going to want to talk a lot.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially given like what we were saying earlier, where these people don't know the process. Unlike other lead types, they may know what's going on or have at least a better idea. But given the complexities of foreclosures, you want to make them feel secure,
right?
If you're going to be, helping them out through this.
Right. Well, like a probate lead, there's no urgency with a probate lead. It takes however long it takes, and the end result is they get to sell the property. So for them, there just isn't that much urgency with some of these other lead types. Now, there could be some other things going on with those other lead types, or that person could just be, very much in need of handholding. But foreclosures, you will always have to focus on that seller and keeping them in the loop and letting them know each step of the process.
Great. Well, you've given us a lot of great insight and detail. I guess, if there was one piece of advice that you could give to somebody who is going to start marketing or currently is marketing to foreclosure leads, what would that piece of advice be?
Really learn how to express empathy. Really learn that as part of your negotiation with this particular class of leads, but really any kind of leads, you really have to be an expert in understanding the person's psychology. So take some time to, if you don't know any psychology, or if you're not, if you're not familiar with that, get some books. There's 100 of them on Amazon. There's a lot, and there's 100 of them for real estate investors as well. And really learn how that person ticks and what you have to do as someone who's trying to help them and also benefit from it at the same time. But learn some of that basic kind of psychology and empathy. And, and if you're not that person, like if you're just not an empathetic person, then hire someone to do it for you. Because it really, really does take a lot of empathy, a lot of understanding what they're going through to make these leads work.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Amy. This has been a big learning experience for me. Where can people learn more about you, or where can they connect with you?
Sure. You can go to amyfarrow.com. And I think you're going to post that below. But we also have a company called Easy Button REI, which is a tool company for real estate investors. Cold calling, bandit signs, list services, all sorts of different things. In fact, Andrew, you're going to need to talk to me about that one.
Sure, yes.
Anyway, but that's how you can get in touch with me.
All right, perfect. Well, everybody check that out. Again, I'll have those links in the description below. But again, thank you so much, Amy. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Best of luck to you.
All right, thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.